Admiral Kextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching death approach. The massive view screen showed what remained of the Third Fleet, broken ships spinning in the void, their hulls torn open like flowers made of metal and fire. Just 6 hours ago, those same vessels had been the pride of the Zelani Republic, carrying 40,000 souls into battle. Now they were tombs. "Signal from the Brave Dawn, Admiral," his communications officer reported, her voice shaking. "They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance." Kextar closed his 4 eyes and felt his heart sink lower in his chest. The Brave Dawn was a medical frigate, filled with wounded from their first encounter with the enemy. If the Devourers had found them, then nowhere in this system was safe. "Tell them we're coming," he said quietly. "Full speed." But even as he gave the order, Kextar knew they would be too late. The enemy ships appeared on sensors like black holes made visible, massive forms that bent space around them and drank light itself. Where they passed, stars grew dim and cold. Where they stopped, entire worlds simply ceased to exist. The Devourers had returned after 3,000 years of silence, and they were more terrible than the ancient stories claimed. On the command deck, officers from 12 different species worked side by side, their various forms of communication, creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic tones. The Galactic Coalition had taken centuries to build, bringing together races that had once fought bitter wars. Now they faced extinction together. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim," said Commander Thale, his insectoid features twitching with distress. "The Koro system is gone, all of it. The star, the planets, the mining stations, everything just vanished." Kextar felt his stomach turn. Koros had been home to 2 billion Thelian farmers. Their planet produced food for half the galaxy. Now it was empty space, as if it had never existed at all. "What about the evacuation fleets?" he asked. "No word, sir. Nothing on any frequency." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. Everyone understood what this meant. The Coalition's greatest strength had always been their diversity. Different species brought different technologies, different ways of thinking, different solutions to impossible problems. But against the Devourers, none of it mattered. The enemy was too old, too advanced, too alien. They had fought and defeated civilizations when the galaxy was young. They turned entire star systems into fuel for their ships and organic matter, into components for their bodies. They were not just invaders, they were a force of nature like gravity or entropy. "Sir," said the sensor operator, a young Corellian barely out of training, "we're detecting spatial distortions near the 4th planet. Multiple contacts heading our way." Kextar looked at the display and saw death approaching. 3 Devourer vessels, each the size of a small moon, moved through space with impossible grace. Reality seemed to bend around them, creating strange optical effects that hurt to look at directly. "All ships, retreat formation Beta," he ordered. Emergency jump to rally point 7. But he knew it was pointless. The Devourers could follow hyperspace trails like bloodhounds. They would hunt down every Coalition ship, every colony, every trace of galactic civilization. Within a year, maybe less, the galaxy would be empty and silent. As his fleet prepared to jump, Kextar thought about the emergency session scheduled for tomorrow on Galactic Prime. Representatives from every member world would gather to discuss their options. But what options were there? Their best scientists couldn't understand Devourer technology. Their strongest weapons couldn't scratch Devourer hulls. Their fastest ships couldn't escape Devourer pursuit. The jump to hyperspace was rough, causing the ship to shake and groan. Kextar held onto his command chair and watched the stars stretch into lines outside the viewports. Behind them, the Devourer ships followed like patient predators. Hours later, they emerged at Rally Point 7, a hidden base built inside a dead asteroid. Other ships were already there, the survivors of a dozen different battles, all with the same story. The enemy was unstoppable. The enemy was everywhere. The enemy was winning. Admiral Kextar made his way to the communications center and sent his report to Coalition Command. The words felt heavy in his mouth as he spoke them. Total defeat, massive casualties, recommend immediate evacuation of all border systems. It was the same report coming in from every front. That night, as he sat alone in his quarters, Kextar pulled up the historical archives. Somewhere in those files was mention of species that had fought the Devourers before. Most were extinct now, their worlds cold and empty. But there were stories, legends, fragments of data about races that had shown unusual resistance to the ancient enemy. One file caught his attention. It was marked with the highest security classifications and carried warnings about dangerous information. The header read, Species File 2847A, Homo sapiens, quarantined. Kextar had heard whispers about humans over the years. They were supposedly an aggressive species from a world called Earth, quarantined by coalition forces after they proved too violent to integrate safely. The official story was that they had destroyed themselves in nuclear fire centuries ago. But the file suggested something different. According to the ancient records, humans had been present during the last Devourer invasion. They had fought alongside other species in the final desperate battles. The reports were fragmentary and heavily censored, but they mentioned something that made Kextar's blood run cold. Humans who continued fighting even when victory was impossible, who seemed to take strength from desperation itself. The file contained coordinates for the Sol system, the human homeworld. It also contained a warning. Under no circumstances should contact be attempted. Species demonstrates extreme unpredictability and capacity for violence. Recommend permanent isolation. But as Kextar looked at the reports flooding in from across the galaxy, as he watched the Devourers consume entire civilizations, he realized that unpredictability and violence might be exactly what they needed. The next morning, he stood before the Coalition Emergency Assembly. Representatives from every surviving world filled the great chamber, their faces showing the same expression of hopeless determination. They had tried everything. Their combined fleets were scattered. Their best strategies had failed. They were out of options. There is one possibility, Kextar said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. The Sol system. The quarantined human homeworld. The reaction was immediate. Voices rose in protest, in fear and confusion. Most representatives had never heard of humans. Those who had knew only the warnings. The stories of a species so dangerous that isolation had been the only solution. The humans were present during the last Devourer War, Kextar continued. The records are incomplete, but they suggest something unusual about human resistance to the enemy. You want to break a 300-year quarantine? Asked the Altarian delegate, her crystalline form flickering with agitation. Release a species so violent that our ancestors locked them away? Our ancestors are dead, Kextar replied quietly. And soon we will be too unless we try something different. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. They were dying. They had nothing left to lose. Sometimes, when facing impossible odds, the only rational choice was to try something completely irrational. As the session ended, Kextar received authorization for a single reconnaissance mission to the Sol system. He would take his fastest ship and a minimal crew. If the humans were extinct, they would know within days. If they were alive, well, then they would discover what 300 years of isolation had done to the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Captain Valandra checked the navigation display for the 10th time in an hour. The coordinates were correct, but she still could not believe they were actually going to do this. Breaking a centuries-old quarantine was the kind of decision that ended careers and started wars. But with the Devourers consuming star systems faster than they could count, normal rules no longer applied. Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, announced her pilot, a nervous young Zalani whose hands shook slightly on the controls. The entire crew was on edge. Everyone knew the stories about humans, even if most of those stories were probably lies. The ship shuddered as it returned to normal space, and the view screen showed them the Sol system. Valandra had expected to see the aftermath of nuclear war, a dead star with burned planets orbiting in silence. Instead, she found herself staring at something that defied all expectation. Earth was not dead. It was alive, vibrant, covered in the blue and green that indicated a healthy biosphere. But that was not the shocking part. The shocking part was everything else. Massive structures orbited the planet like metal moons. Ships moved between them in orderly patterns. Vessels of designs that looked both familiar and completely alien. The fourth planet, which her database said was called Mars, glowed with the red light of active terraforming. Asteroid belts showed signs of extensive mining operations. Captain, said her sensor operator, his voice barely above a whisper, I'm reading energy signatures that don't match anything in our database. And the scale. Some of these structures are larger than our biggest space stations. How is this possible? Valandra muttered. They were supposed to be extinct. Sir, we're being scanned, reported the communications officer. Multiple sources, very sophisticated. They know we're here. Open a channel. Standard first contact protocols. Channel open, Captain. Velandra took a deep breath. This is Captain Velsandra of the Galactic Coalition Vessel Seeker. We come in peace and request permission to communicate. The response came almost immediately in perfect galactic standard. Coalition Vessel Seeker. This is Earth Defense Command. You are in violation of the Sol Quarantine Treaty. Article 7, Section 12. State your business or prepare to be escorted out of the system. The voice was calm, professional, and completely unintimidated. Velandra felt a chill run down her spine. These humans did not sound like a species that had spent 3 centuries in isolation. They sounded like they had been expecting visitors. Earth Defense Command, we are here on urgent coalition business. The galaxy faces an extinction-level threat. We need to speak with your leadership. There was a pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it belonged to someone different, older, with an authority that made Velandra straighten in her chair. Coalition vessel. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You have permission to dock with Station Olympus. A security escort will guide you in. Be advised that any hostile action will result in immediate destruction. Understood, Admiral. Thank you. As her ship followed the escort vessels toward the massive orbital station, Velandra tried to process what she was seeing. The human ships were sleek and efficient, built with technology that looked decades ahead of coalition standards. Their weapons were subtle but clearly powerful. This was not the technology of a species that had destroyed itself. This was the technology of a species that had grown stronger in isolation. Station Olympus was a marvel of engineering, a rotating habitat that could house millions, built around a central core that pulsed with unknown energy. Docking was smooth and professional, handled by systems that responded faster than any coalition traffic control. The airlock opened to reveal a single human woman in a dark blue uniform. She was shorter than Velandra had expected, with brown skin and black hair pulled back in a simple style. But her eyes were what caught attention, intelligent, calculating, and completely without fear. Captain Velandra, she said, extending her hand in what Velandra recognized as a human greeting gesture. I'm Commander Sarah Chen. Welcome to Sol. Velandra carefully shook the offered hand, noting the strength in the human's grip. Commander, thank you for allowing us entry. I know this is irregular. Irregular is one word for it, Sarah replied with what might have been humor. Breaking a 300-year quarantine usually indicates either desperation or stupidity. I'm hoping it's desperation. As they walked through the station corridors, Velandra was amazed by what she saw. The humans had not just survived their isolation, they had thrived. The technology around her was clean, efficient, and sophisticated. The people they passed looked healthy and confident, showing none of the signs of a declining civilization. Commander, may I ask, what happened here? The record suggested your species had destroyed itself. Sarah's expression darkened slightly. The records suggest a lot of things. Most of them are wrong. We didn't destroy ourselves, Captain. We grew up. They entered a briefing room with a large holographic display. Sarah gestured for Velandra to sit at a conference table that could accommodate several species' different anatomies. Now, Sarah said, tell me about this extinction-level threat. Velandra activated her portable data unit and projected images of the Devourer attacks. She watched Sarah's face carefully as she explained the situation. The return of the ancient enemy, the destruction of entire star systems, the failure of coalition forces to mount any effective resistance. Sarah's expression remained calm throughout the briefing, but Velandra noticed her hands tightening slightly when the images showed the Koro system being consumed. When the presentation ended, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. The Devourers, she said finally. We remember them. You remember them? But that was 3,000 years ago. Human memory is longer than most people think, Sarah replied. We keep records. We pass down stories. We remember our enemies. She stood and walked to the holographic display, manipulating the controls with practiced ease. New images appeared. Ancient star charts, technical schematics, battle reports written in human languages. Your ancestors weren't the only ones who fought the Devourers last time, Sarah continued. Humans were there too. We learned things about them that others forgot. We've been preparing for their return. Preparing how? Sarah smiled. And for the first time, Velandra saw something in her expression that made her understand why humans had been quarantined. It was not cruelty or madness, it was something more disturbing. It was the look of someone who had spent centuries planning for war. That's classified information, Captain, but I can tell you this. The Coalition's approach won't work. You can't fight the Devourers with conventional tactics. They're too old, too advanced. They've seen every strategy, countered every weapon. Then how do we stop them? We don't stop them, Sarah said quietly. We make them stop themselves. She activated her communicator. Command, this is Chen. Initiate Protocol Prometheus. Full authorization. Acknowledged, Commander. Protocol Prometheus is now active. Sarah turned back to Velandra. Captain, I need you to return to Coalition space immediately. Tell your leaders that humanity accepts full membership in the Galactic Coalition. Effective immediately. Tell them we're mobilizing our forces to assist against the Devourer threat. What forces? How many ships do you have? Ship numbers are irrelevant, Captain. What matters is that we have something the Devourers can't plan for. Can't counter, can't understand. Sarah's smile grew wider, and Velandra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature control. What's that? We have humans, Sarah said simply. And humans do things that no sane species would ever consider. As Velandra prepared to leave, she realized that the quarantine had not been imposed to protect the galaxy from human violence. It had been imposed to protect the galaxy from human solutions to impossible problems. Now faced with extinction, the Coalition was about to discover exactly what 300 years of human preparation could accomplish. The ride back to her ship was silent, but Velandra's mind raced with questions. What was Protocol Prometheus? What had the humans been building during their isolation? And most importantly, what kind of solution would a species known for dangerous creativity devise for an enemy that consumed entire star systems? As the Seeker departed Sul and jumped to hyperspace, Velandra carried with her the strangest feeling she had ever experienced. For the first time since the Devourers returned, she felt something that might have been hope. Behind her in the Sol system, humanity prepared for war in ways that would have terrified their enemies, if their enemies had been capable of understanding fear. The Terran High Command meeting room was a study in controlled tension. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before a curved table, where 12 of humanity's most senior military and scientific leaders sat in silence. The holographic display behind her showed real-time feeds from across the galaxy, Coalition fleets retreating, worlds going dark, entire star systems vanishing from sensor grids. The situation is exactly what we prepared for, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was reporting. The Devourers have returned in full force. Coalition estimates suggest they're consuming approximately one star system every 18 hours. General Marcus Rivera, head of Terran ground forces, leaned forward. How long until they reach Coalition core worlds? 6 weeks, maybe less, Sarah replied. The Coalition's defensive strategy is failing completely. Their fleets can't even slow the enemy advance. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief scientist of the Prometheus project, activated her datapad. Our deep space monitoring stations have been tracking the Devourers for the past 72 hours. The energy signatures match our theoretical models perfectly. They're using harvested stellar matter as fuel, converting entire planetary populations into organic components for their ships. Just like the historical records predicted, added Admiral James Wright, commander of the Sol Defense Fleet. The question is whether our countermeasures will work against technology that's 3,000 years more advanced than it was during the last invasion. Sarah moved to the holographic controls and brought up a new display. The Coalition made the same mistake our ancestors did. They're trying to fight the Devourers like a conventional enemy, but these aren't invaders looking for territory or resources. They're a force of cosmic entropy, designed to reduce complex matter back to its basic components, which is why we developed the Prometheus Protocol, said Dr. Vasquez. Traditional weapons target matter and energy. The Devourers can absorb and redirect both, but they can't process pure chaos. Their systems are too ordered, too structured. General Rivera looked skeptical. You're talking about deliberately introducing entropy into the battlefield. That's not a weapon, that's a disaster waiting to happen. Yes, Sarah said simply, and that's exactly why it will work. She activated a new section of the display, showing a three-dimensional map of human space. Thousands of small indicators appeared scattered throughout the Sol system and beyond. For 300 years, we've been building the Prometheus fleet, 67,000 volunteer crews, each specially trained for one mission. They're not soldiers in the traditional sense. They're chaos agents. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Admiral Wright was the first to speak. 67,000 ships. That's larger than the entire coalition fleet. Size isn't what matters, Sarah replied. What matters is what they're carrying. Dr. Vasquez stood and walked to the display. Each Prometheus ship contains an entropy bomb of our own design. Not nuclear weapons or antimatter devices, but machines that create localized fields of pure randomness. They destabilize quantum structures, randomize molecular bonds, and introduce chaotic variables into any ordered system. The Devourer's greatest strength is their ability to predict and counter organized resistance, Sarah continued. But chaos can't be predicted. Randomness can't be countered. When faced with pure entropy, their systems will do what any ordered system does. They'll try to process it, and they'll fail. General Rivera stared at the display. You're talking about weaponizing fundamental forces of the universe. The collateral damage alone will be catastrophic, Sarah agreed. Each entropy bomb will create a zone of instability roughly the size of a small moon. Anything caught in that zone will be randomized down to the subatomic level, including our ships and crews. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. This was not a battle plan. It was a coordinated suicide mission on an unprecedented scale. How many volunteers do we have? Asked Admiral Wright quietly. All of them, Sarah replied. Every single crew member requested assignment to the Prometheus fleet. We had to turn away millions of applicants. Dr. Vasquez activated another display showing psychological profiles and training records. The crews underwent 15 years of specialized preparation. They're not just willing to die for this mission, they're eager to. They understand that this is humanity's chance to prove something important about who we are. And what's that? General Rivera asked. That when the galaxy faces extinction, humans don't run. We don't hide. We don't surrender. We do whatever it takes to protect others, even if it means sacrificing everything we have. Sarah moved back to the command position. The coalition delegates are expecting a conventional military response. They're going to get something very different. Admiral Wright, begin dispersal of the Prometheus fleet. Target the Devourer advance forces first, then work your way back to their core systems. Acknowledged. How do we coordinate with coalition forces? We don't, Sarah said firmly. Coalition tactics are based on preservation and tactical withdrawal. Our tactics are based on maximum entropy generation and complete crew expenditure. The two approaches are incompatible. She activated her personal communicator. All Prometheus commanders, this is Admiral Chen. Protocol Prometheus is now fully active. You have authorization to begin entropy deployment at your discretion. Remember, your mission is not to win a battle. Your mission is to break something that cannot be fixed. The responses came back immediately from across human space. 67,000 voices speaking in unison. Understood, Admiral. For humanity. For the galaxy. As the meeting dispersed, Dr. Vasquez remained behind with Sarah. Are you sure about this? Once we start using entropy weapons, there's no going back. We're fundamentally altering the rules of galactic warfare. Sarah looked at the real-time feeds from Coalition space, watching another star system go dark. The rules already changed when the Devourers returned. We're just adapting faster than everyone else. The Coalition representatives were horrified when I showed them the weapon specifications, Dr. Vasquez said. They called it insane. They're not wrong, Sarah replied. It is insane. But sanity isn't going to save the galaxy. Sometimes when you're facing impossible odds, the only rational response is to do something completely irrational. Over the next several hours, the Prometheus fleet began its deployment. Ships that had waited in hidden bases throughout the Sol system emerged and jumped to hyperspace, carrying their crews and their cargo of weaponized chaos toward battles that would reshape the galaxy. Each ship was small, fast, and designed for a single mission. Their crews were volunteers who had spent years preparing for this moment, training in simulations that taught them to think like forces of nature rather than military units. They were not soldiers. They were human hurricanes, human earthquakes, human expressions of controlled chaos. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the deployment from the command center on Station Olympus, surrounded by displays showing the movement of forces across thousands of light years. The Devourers were advancing on 12 fronts, consuming everything in their path. In response, humanity was releasing 67,000 small pieces of organized madness into the void. First contact in 14 hours, reported her tactical officer. The lead Prometheus ships will engage Devourer scouts near the Rigel system. Signal all ships, Sarah ordered. Remind them that their job is not to survive. Their job is to introduce so much chaos into Devourer systems that the enemy's consciousness fractures under the strain of processing pure randomness. As the hours passed, Sarah thought about the volunteers now racing toward certain death. They were teachers and engineers, artists and farmers, people who had chosen to spend their lives serving something larger than themselves. They carried with them not just weapons, but humanity's answer to cosmic horror. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment, developing solutions that no sane species would consider. They had weaponized their own willingness to sacrifice everything for others. The Devourers had evolved to counter organized resistance, predictable tactics, and rational strategies. They had not evolved to counter the human capacity for beautiful, terrible necessary madness. In 14 hours, they would discover that some problems could only be solved by beings willing to embrace chaos as a weapon, entropy as a strategy, and self-destruction as a gift to the future. Commander Elena Rodriguez felt her ship shudder as it dropped out of hyperspace near the Rigel system. Through the viewscreen, she could see the Devourer scout ships, massive dark forms that seemed to bend light around them like black holes with purpose. Her hands were steady on the controls despite knowing that in the next few minutes, she and her crew would cease to exist. Target analysis complete, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Park. 3 Devourer vessels, standard harvester configuration. They're stripping matter from the outer planets. Entropy bomb status, Elena asked. Armed and ready, replied Dr. Singh from the weapons station. Quantum randomization field is stable. We have full chaos generation capability. Elena looked around the bridge at her crew of 12. They had trained together for 15 years preparing for this exact moment. Each face showed the same expression, calm determination mixed with something that might have been joy. They were about to do something impossible, something that would save billions of lives they would never meet. Open a channel to the other Prometheus ships in this system, Elena ordered. Channel open. Commander. All ships, this is Rodriguez on the Entropy's edge. Remember your training. We are not here to fight these things. We are here to break them. Individual targeting, maximum dispersion pattern. Let's show the galaxy what chaos can accomplish. The 12 Prometheus ships in the Rigel system spread out, each taking a different approach vector to the Devourer scouts. Elena watched the tactical display and felt proud of her fellow crews. They moved like dancers, like artists creating a masterpiece of coordinated destruction. Devourers are responding, Park reported. They're launching interceptor drones. Elena saw the enemy response on her screen. Thousands of small craft emerging from the massive ships, moving to intercept the human vessels. The drones moved with perfect coordination, their formation patterns showing the mathematical precision that characterized all Devourer technology. Perfect, Elena muttered. The more organized they are, the harder they'll fall. Her ship shook as enemy fire began to impact their shields. The Prometheus vessels were not built for prolonged combat. They were delivery systems designed to get their cargo to the target and deploy it successfully. Everything else was secondary. Shields at 60%, Park announced. Doesn't matter, Elena replied. We only need to get close enough for entropy deployment. Dr. Singh, prepare for immediate release on my mark. The Entropy's edge accelerated toward the nearest Devourer ship, dodging interceptor fire and debris from the dying planets below. Around them, the other Prometheus ships were making their own attack runs, each one carrying its crew closer to certain death and the galaxy closer to salvation. Range optimal, Dr. Singh reported. Entropy bomb ready for deployment. Elena looked at the massive Devourer ship ahead of them, its hull covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Somewhere inside that vessel was a consciousness older than human civilization, a mind that had witnessed the birth and death of countless species. In a few seconds, that ancient mind would encounter something it had never experienced before, pure weaponized chaos. Deploy entropy bomb, Elena ordered. Full randomization field, maximum dispersion. The weapon launched from their ship like a small star, racing toward the Devourer vessel at relativistic speed. Elena watched it go and felt a strange sense of completion, as if her entire life had been leading to this moment. Impact in 5 seconds, Dr. Singh announced. All crew prepare for entropy field exposure. Elena gripped her command chair and smiled. It's been an honor serving with all of you. The entropy bomb struck the Devourer ship and exploded into a sphere of pure randomness. Space itself seemed to fracture within the field, with reality becoming fluid and unpredictable. The ancient vessel, designed to process and absorb any form of organized matter or energy, suddenly found itself trying to understand something that had no pattern, no logic, no structure. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Devourer ship's hull began to shift and change, its carefully engineered systems randomizing into impossible configurations. Its consciousness, evolved over millennia to handle vast amounts of complex data, suddenly faced input that made no sense, followed no rules, and could not be processed or understood. Elena's ship was caught in the edge of the entropy field, its hull beginning to shimmer and phase as quantum randomization took hold, but she had just enough time to see the Devourer vessel's death throes, watching as the ancient enemy's perfect order collapsed into beautiful, terrible chaos. Across the system, 11 other entropy bombs detonated simultaneously. The 3 Devourer scout ships, faced with multiple sources of pure randomness, began to tear themselves apart as their systems tried and failed to process the impossible data streams. Their interceptor drones, suddenly receiving contradictory orders from consciousnesses that could no longer think clearly, began attacking each other in confused desperation. The battle lasted 7 minutes. When it ended, the Rigel system contained nothing but expanding clouds of randomized matter and 3 zones of permanent spatial instability where physics itself had broken down. Light years away, Admiral Sarah Chen watched the tactical display from the command center on Station Olympus. The first contact had gone exactly as planned. Complete destruction of the enemy force, with predictable total loss of human ships and crews. Confirmed kills on 3 Devourer scouts, reported her tactical officer. Prometheus Group Alpha has been expended successfully. Signal all remaining groups, Sarah ordered. The entropy weapons are effective against Devourer consciousness. Continue with planned deployment schedule. Over the next several days, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Prometheus ships appeared wherever Devourer forces were detected, delivering their cargo of weaponized chaos and vanishing in bursts of randomized matter. Each engagement followed the same pattern: total destruction of both human and enemy forces, leaving behind only zones of broken physics and confused space. The Devourers, for the first time in their ancient existence, began to retreat. Their perfect consciousness, evolved to process and understand any form of organized data, could not handle the streams of pure randomness being introduced into their systems. Ships that had consumed entire civilizations fled from small human vessels carrying nothing but entropy and death, but the humans pressed their advantage relentlessly. Prometheus ships hunted Devourer forces through hyperspace, tracking them to their staging areas and forward bases. Each attack introduced more chaos into the enemy network, more randomness into their shared consciousness. Dr. Elena Vasquez, monitoring the effects from her laboratory on Earth, watched the data streams with fascination and horror. The entropy bombs aren't just destroying individual ships, she reported to Admiral Chen. They're damaging the Devourer collective consciousness itself. Each randomization event creates permanent cognitive scarring. How many more attacks before we achieve critical consciousness failure? Sarah asked, unknown. The Devourers have been operating as a collective mind for millions of years, but they're showing increasing signs of decision-making paralysis and strategic confusion. The entropy attacks are literally driving them insane. Sarah nodded grimly. Continue the bombardment. We have 43,000 Prometheus ships remaining. Use them all if necessary. As the campaign continued, the galaxy watched in stunned amazement as humanity's suicide fleet systematically dismantled an enemy that had seemed invincible. Coalition observers, monitoring the battles from safe distances, could barely comprehend what they were seeing. The humans weren't winning through superior firepower or advanced technology. They were winning by deliberately breaking the fundamental rules of organized warfare. Each Prometheus ship represented 50 human lives willingly sacrificed for strangers they would never meet. Each entropy bomb created permanent damage to reality itself, zones of chaos that would never heal. The humans were literally tearing holes in the fabric of spacetime to protect a galaxy that had quarantined them for centuries. It was magnificent. It was terrifying. It was the most human thing anyone had ever witnessed. The Devourers, ancient and terrible, had finally encountered something they could not understand, could not process, and could not overcome. A species willing to weaponize its own extinction for the sake of others. The galaxy was learning that sometimes the greatest victories required the most beautiful defeats, and that chaos, properly applied, could be the ultimate form of order. The Devourer mothership hung in space like a nightmare made manifest. It was the size of Jupiter, its surface covered in structures that defied geometric logic. This was the heart of the enemy fleet, the central consciousness that coordinated the harvest of entire civilizations. For 3 weeks it had been retreating deeper into the void, trying to escape the chaos that human forces had unleashed across the galaxy. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, humanity's last and largest Prometheus ship. Around her, a crew of 200 volunteers prepared for the most important suicide mission in galactic history. They had tracked the mothership to this empty region of space, far from any inhabited systems, where the final confrontation would take place. Target analysis complete, reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes from the tactical station. The mothership is generating massive defensive fields, but they're all designed to counter organized attacks. Our entropy weapons should penetrate without difficulty. Sarah nodded, watching the massive enemy vessel on the main screen. How many smaller ships? Approximately 50,000 support craft, Hayes replied, all showing signs of the consciousness damage we've been inflicting. Their formation patterns are increasingly erratic. Over the past month, the Prometheus fleet had systematically hunted down Devourer forces throughout the galaxy. 66,000 ships had been expended, their crews willingly sacrificing themselves to introduce chaos into the enemy's ordered systems. The effect had been cumulative and devastating. The Devourer collective consciousness was fracturing under the strain of processing pure randomness. Signal from Admiral Chen at Seoul. Command, announced the communications officer. Sarah activated the display, and her sister's face appeared on screen. Admiral Sarah Chen looked older than her years, bearing the weight of commanding humanity's desperate gambit. Commander, you have final authorization for Operation Omega, the Admiral said. All Prometheus forces have been expended except for your ship. The galaxy is counting on you. Understood, Admiral. We're ready. Sarah, her sister said, using her personal name for the first time in the mission. I want you to know that what you're doing today will be remembered for as long as civilization exists. Humanity is proud of you, Commander Chen smiled. Tell them we answered the call. We always answer the call. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Around them, the crew made final preparations for an attack that would either save the galaxy or accomplish nothing except adding their names to the longest casualty list in human history. All stations report ready, Hayes announced. Entropy bomb is armed and configured for maximum chaos generation. Target lock confirmed on the mothership's central consciousness cluster. Sarah looked around the bridge at faces she had come to know over 15 years of training. These people had volunteered knowing they would never see home again, never have children, never grow old. They had chosen to spend their lives as a weapon aimed at cosmic horror. Open a channel to the mothership, she ordered. Channel open, Commander. Sarah stood and addressed the ancient enemy directly. Devourer consciousness, this is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You have violated the sovereign space of the Galactic Coalition and threatened the extinction of countless innocent species. We are here to stop you. The response came as a wave of electronic noise that gradually resolved into something resembling speech. The voice was vast, ancient, and increasingly confused. We are order. We are perfection. We process. We consume. We perfect. Your chaos cannot, error. Randomization detected. Systems failing. Your perfection ends today, Sarah replied. Some things are worth more than order. Some things are worth more than survival. Some things are worth everything. She turned to her crew. All hands prepare for entropy deployment. Remember, we're not just destroying an enemy. We're proving something important about what it means to be human. The Valkyrie accelerated toward the mothership, dodging defensive fire from the increasingly erratic support craft. The enemy weapons were powerful but poorly coordinated, as the collective consciousness struggled to maintain control over its vast fleet. Optimal range achieved, Hayes reported. Entropy bomb ready for deployment. Sarah looked at the massive alien structure ahead of them and felt a strange sense of peace. For 300 years, humanity had been isolated, feared, and forgotten. Today, they would remind the galaxy that humans were capable of extraordinary things when others needed them. Deploy entropy bomb, she ordered. Full chaos generation, maximum randomization field. The weapon launched from their ship like a miniature sun, racing toward the heart of the mothership at nearly the speed of light. Sarah watched it go and thought about all the people who would live because of what they were about to do. Coalition citizens they had never met, on worlds they would never see. Children who would grow up free because 50 humans had chosen to embrace chaos as salvation. Impact in 10 seconds, Hayes announced. All crew, it's been an honor. The entropy bomb struck the mothership's central consciousness cluster and exploded into the largest randomization field ever created. Space itself seemed to scream as reality broke down across a volume larger than Earth's moon. The ancient vessel, its systems designed for perfect order and mathematical precision, suddenly found itself trying to process infinite streams of pure chaos. The effect was beyond catastrophic. The mothership's consciousness, evolved over millions of years to coordinate the harvest of entire galaxies, simply could not handle the randomization data. Its thoughts scattered into incoherent fragments. Its perfect coordination dissolved into confusion and madness. Throughout the system, 50,000 support ships suddenly found themselves without direction, their shared consciousness replaced by static and randomness. Some began attacking each other. Others simply stopped moving, their crews paralyzed by the cognitive damage spreading through their network. The Valkyrie was consumed by the entropy field within seconds, its crew and hull randomized into component atoms. But Sarah Chen's last sensation was one of completion, watching the ancient enemy's perfect order collapse into beautiful, necessary chaos. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations detected the massive entropy explosion and its effects. The Devourer fleet, suddenly cut off from their central consciousness, began to retreat into the dark spaces between stars. Their campaign of consumption ended not with defeat, but with madness, their collective mind too damaged to continue thinking, too confused to coordinate further attacks. In the weeks that followed, coalition forces swept through formerly occupied systems, finding abandoned Devourer ships drifting powerless in space. The ancient enemy had not been destroyed, but they had been broken in a way that would take millennia to repair. Their perfect consciousness lay shattered, scattered across the void in fragments too small to threaten anyone. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the memorial hall on Station Olympus, looking at the wall containing 67,000 names, every human who had volunteered for the Prometheus fleet. The galaxy was safe, but the price had been almost half of humanity's population. Admiral Kekstar of the Zelani Republic entered the hall, moving with the careful respect appropriate for sacred ground. He had come to offer the Coalition's formal gratitude and to invite humanity to take its place as an honored member of galactic civilization. Admiral Chen, he said quietly, on behalf of every species in the Coalition, I want to thank you for what your people have done. Billions of lives were saved by their sacrifice. Sarah nodded, still looking at the names on the wall. They knew the cost when they volunteered. Every single one of them. The Coalition Council has voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership and honored status, Kekstar continued. We want to ensure that your species is never isolated again. We appreciate that, Sarah replied. But understand we didn't do this for membership or honor. We did it because others needed help, and we were capable of providing it. Kekstar studied her face, trying to understand the mindset that had produced such extraordinary sacrifice. Your species continues to confuse us. Why are you willing to pay such prices for strangers? Sarah finally turned from the memorial wall to look at him directly. Because that's what civilized beings do, Admiral. When the darkness comes, someone has to stand between it and the innocent. Sometimes that someone gets consumed by the darkness, but the light continues. As Kekstar departed, Sarah returned to her contemplation of the names on the wall. Outside the station's viewports, new human colony ships were already departing for distant systems, carrying families who would rebuild what had been lost. The galaxy had learned that humans were not just warriors or madmen. They were guardians who would sacrifice everything to protect others, even those who had feared and rejected them. They had weaponized their own extinction and used it to purchase safety for trillions of innocent lives. In the depths of space, damaged devourer ships drifted aimlessly, their crews struggling to comprehend what had happened to their perfect order. They had encountered something they had never imagined possible, a species that could win by losing, that could save others by destroying themselves, that could turn chaos itself into an act of love. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.